Okay, so activity 21, copy and paste. Cool. All right, so this is what we're going to do. We'll start with what's in the README. It says first thing we got to do is separate form and list into two different components and put them in a folder called components. So that's what I'm going to do. Create a new folder called components. Just by the way, Ben, can you see my screen? Okay. All right. Okay, cool. So now that I have these components, or I have a folder for the component, I need to actually create a file for form and create a file for to-do list. Perfect. They're empty. Let's start with a boilerplate for a React functional component. The boilerplate for a React functional component is to import React from React. The next thing is to name the component. So in this case, it's going to be a to-do list on this one. The to-do, and it's going to return UI. It returns UI. In this case, we got nothing, but that's where we're going to return it from when we get it. And in order to make this usable by the world, we have to export default to-do list. We don't want to call the function. Perfect. Okay, so this to me is boilerplate for a React functional component. I'm going to copy and paste it in here and change this to form. That way we've just reused that boilerplate. Now, the stuff that goes on line 5, we're going to yank from app. Here is our form. The form is two parts. It's the form itself and it's the header. Cut, paste. Okay, I got a little red squiggle here. The reason is because React needs to return all of these siblings in one parent component, okay? Which means it can just be wrapped in anything. In this case, I'll just create a div. And that makes the red squiggle go away. I'm not sure why React needs that, but it just does. When these were just two siblings, the h1 and the form, React doesn't like that. It needs to be wrapped in something. So that return is returning an outer one component. So now that we've just learned that, it's going to be the same thing for this to-do list. If I cut this out and put it in the to-do list over here, it's going to give me a red squiggle here again. So that just means come out here and create a containing wrapper. So as this is, the form and to-do list are not done. There are some things inside here that need to be handled, like there's items in there. What's items to to-do list at this point? Because the to-do list doesn't know what that is. So we'll need to come back and get them. But at this point, before I go any further, I'm going to bring in import form. Components. Oops, that's going too far out. Components form. Cool. Now let's import the to-do list. Save. Let me pause this because I get no moment's rest. Okay. So I brought them in. Now I can use them inside my app, which is here. We want to put them inside here. This is going to become my code formatter took away these parentheses. This is where my form goes. At this point, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to use them, but I'm going to put them where they belong for now. Okay, if I save this, I come and look at my app, See, it's broken. It's not quite working yet. That's fine because we're not there yet. Go to the README. Create a folder called utils. And within it, create a single file that will be the application store. The file should export a provider. We use to wrap the entire application and a use to do context object that will be used to inject the context into a component that needs access to the store. Okay. So that means I need to create a new folder called utils. And in here, I'm going to create a file called global state. That's globe null state. So let's do a global state.js. We want to duplicate a lot of the behavior. We already have a kind of boilerplate for it inside Activity 20. So let's go in there, grab this global state, copy it, bring it in here. It's basically, think of it as a framework, and we need to replace a lot of stuff in here that's useful for our application, our new Activity 21 application. So I'm going to try to label some of this stuff. This is, number one, we got to create the context. Again, the context is the global, this is what creates the global scope that we can then use in our component for its local scope. But instead of calling it count context, we're going to call it to do context. Copy, paste. This is the actual reducer function. Well, first, before that, we want to destructure the provider context. As you remember, when we were doing context, you would actually use this. It would be to do context.provider. Well, we're just pulling it out on its own here. We're destructuring it. Now, this is the reducer. This is the actual function. This is the pure function that takes new state and old state and takes new data, old state, puts them together to create new state. That's what a reducer does. I don't know what the logic is inside here yet. I'm just going to delete that. Cool. Okay, so this is where we basically create the store. Here, we're going to, instead of have a count provider, we're going to have a to-do provider. Since our initial value is not a number, it should be an array. We hold an array of items, so we're going to do an array. That's our initial value. Perfect. The reducer, our use reducer takes two arguments. The reducer function, which is this guy right there, and our initial state. So we've passed that through as the provider value. In that case, we don't want to do count. This is where we're going to store our to-dos. And this should work. So this is going to pass this array here. And this doesn't need to change. Instead of use count context, we're going to use to do context. To do context. And instead of count context, this is now to do context. So we are going to export out these pieces. Okay, done. Phew. Now that we have our global state, we can bring it into our app. Let's import. Oh, at this point, what do we need in our global scope? We only need the provider piece because that's what wraps our app. So let's do the provider, which is the to-do provider. And that is from, we want to go into utils and get global state. Now that I have that to-do provider, I can actually use this. I can use this. So this is a prop. Class name is a prop. And you had a question and it says, what is this props? Well, this is one of those props, this class name. So this is what allows those props to be passed into wherever they need to be applied, I think. Will this work? That's a question now. I wonder if that actually will work. No, the reason is because the provider the reason why it won't work is because this provider doesn't actually get rendered, right? So putting a class name on something that doesn't get rendered is useless. So we still need that div out there. Sorry if I confused this. Okay, so let's put a div here and we'll use the class name that was there and there. So this is what our app should be. Notice how the app seems pretty clean, right? We're delegating a lot of the work to the subcomponents, and that's what you should see in your app, is not a lot of extra stuff in here. Okay. All right, so now how do we get this to work? Well, let's start with these functions. We got to put these functions somewhere else too. So right now there's no ref in here because we've moved that away. I'm going to just remove that. Use reducer. Well, we moved our reducer into global scope, or global state. So the use reducer takes two arguments. The first one is the actual reducer, which is this function. And the second is the default value. Okay, so we don't need this here anymore because we put it into global state. We come into global state. Here's our reducer. So I'm going to paste in what I just grabbed from that other thing. Okay, so let's take a look at this. This is a pure function. It is a pure function, which means that it doesn't need something from outside. So I copied it from another page. And notice I don't need to make any changes to this just because it's basically done. It's pure. It doesn't rely on other dependencies, whereas those other components do. So we are going to need to add the thing about prioritization, but for now, this should work. We're just going to leave it that way. So if I come into app, the reducer is gone, don't need it there. Okay. I'm not exactly sure, where does that handle submit function need to be? Probably needs to be on the form itself, right? Doesn't even need to be here anymore because we can handle this down in the form. So let's go down into the form and make it work. So in my components form, I'm going to need to handle this form submission, so I'm going to paste this here. But in order for this to work, we need to have access to global scope. So this is where we do a use context. On this, we're going to get const this is where we're actually using, not using context, we're using what are we using? We're using this user to do context, which actually should provide us state and dispatch. That's what it's providing us. Yeah, but before I can use it on form, I have to import it from the global state file. So we're going to import use to do context. And this is from, we got to go into utils and grab global state. Okay, perfect. Now that we have it, this is where we need to bring it in. Const. Oops, we don't want it like that. Const This is a destructured array of state and the dispatch function. You need the dispatch function because the form is actually the thing that's going to be changing the state. We get that from use to do context. Needs to be an assignment operator. Cool. Now this dispatch function makes sense, except for we need to apply the input ref, right? This is what the things that was in app that now needs to be in here. So in order for that to work, I have to bring it in up here, use ref hook. And we're going to do a const input ref gets use ref. So now we have an input ref. This should be, yep, it's right there on the input from the ad or from the app. So now this makes sense. Now that makes sense. I'm thinking that our form is actually ready to go. One thing that you might get an error or a warning is state. It's never used. That's okay. The state is never used because we're never using it to update the form in any way, shape, or form, or to track the form. So we can leave it as the word state, which totally makes sense. I don't know why they do this, but sometimes they name it an underscore, which is kind of just show that I don't need it. I think that's obnoxious. But it's kind of a stylistic thing. If you see that underscore, that's what that is. Okay. Form's ready to go. How do we do it in the to-do list? Well, what do we need? First, we're going to need the to-do context because that's where the list of to-dos is. So let's import that just like we did in to-dos. We're going to import that. Use to-do context from utils global state. So cool. We come in here where you're going to call that const state dispatch gets use to do context. Okay, now we have it. Let's see, copy. My state was not items. I had it on state. Maybe, I don't know. It was state dot to-dos. That was an array. Okay. So this will now take each item. This works. All of this works. It's the same stuff. The only thing we don't have on here yet is the prioritized stuff, but let's leave that for last. But this remove button should work. All of that should work. Let's go back to our reducer. I just realized that my reducer might not work because I'm putting stuff on the state.todos. So let's go back to global state. Reducer. Yep. So this is, you can see it's actually putting it directly. State is an array, whereas I had set it up as yeah. So that means, where do I need to change it? I need to change it right here. Reducer, and then this is just value. Because, yep, we're passing this array. Well, this is the default value. We're passing it right in here, so that's totally fine. And now I come back to form. That's good. To-do list. This is where, okay, now we're just mapping over what's stored in state. Okay. So now our to-do list, this should be working. If I come over here, I can add eat lunch. Cool. and I can remove it. So that part totally works. Awesome. Now, the last part, let's go back to our README. Go back to the README. Add an action handler that will allow users to prioritize a to-do. Action handler. An action handler within the reducer, because the reducer is the thing that handles the actions, right? So then the reducer is now in global state. So we have an action handler for add, an action handler for remove. We need one for case prioritize. That's not how you spell it. We are going to return state, but how do we want to prioritize this stuff? Okay. What we're going to do is so items, okay. We got to go find the item based on the index. Okay, so that's how we're actually managing this list, is by the index in it. So first we're going to return some form of state. We're going to have to map over. So the process is when you click that button, the prioritize button, it's going to add a priority Boolean property to our to-do item. Right now we have an ID property and a name property. So we're going to end up adding a priority property. Okay, so we're going to map over it, because map basically changes what's in the array and creates a new one. So we're going to do a state.map. The map function is going to take an item, an index, this arrow function. Since it's going to require some complex logic, we are not going to use the implicit return. By using these braces, I now have to explicitly return whatever it is to go into state. So we're going to search for the thing we want to change. We're going to search for the item we want to change. We're going to search based on its index. So we're going to say if the current index equals the index of the thing we want to change, let's return, and this is weird, we have to return a new object. Again, so we can't reuse the object for that specific to-do item. We have to create a new one. So here's the way you can create a new object. You need to return object.assign. And what this does is it actually merges these things together. It's going to take a blank object, the item itself, and it's going to take this priority. And it's going to be priority, not item priority. Okay, let's take a think. Let's take a think on this one. So you don't know what object assign is. Take a look at what object assign is. The object assign method copies all enumerable own properties from one or more source objects into a target object. Okay, so it's going to copy everything from here into here, and then it returns a brand new object, and that's what we're looking for. We want to return a brand new object. So it's going to copy, if our target is an empty object, our item, we're going to copy that into here, which is whatever to-do item we passed in here, or I'm sorry, into the map function. And then we're also going to merge in this. So this will add a new priority if needed, okay? And what it will do is, if there already is a priority, it's going to negate it. So that's how we toggle the true false, right? But if there isn't an item, or if there isn't a priority, it'll not something that's false. So that'll flip it to true. Interesting little piece of logic here. But this will provide an action handler for prioritization. None of this needs to change. In order for us to trigger that action handler, we have to create a prioritization button. So that's where we can go down into the to-do list and add a button to each to-do item. Here's our remove button. We're going to create a priority. Let's create a priority button. So let's actually put it here. Don't really need this. This is just an empty string. We want to put the priority button here before the remove. So let's create a button. This is prioritize. Prioritize. Okay. We're going to give it, we're going to use Bootstrap classes. So because this is Bootstrap, in this case we could use, oops, just a regular string, and do a button, and we'll use the button warning style. Okay. And we're going to use some of the spacer classes from Bootstrap. This is going to add a margin right of 4, size 4. Let's add that to the okay, it's already down here as margin left 5 for the other button. And I don't know if we actually need both of these, but I'm going to change this to 4. Okay, and this is margin right. So we have a prioritize button. Doesn't do anything yet. And of course, it'll only show up once we add something. So eat lunch. Okay, doesn't do anything yet because we haven't hooked it up to any click handlers. The remove button is hooked up, so it still works. But let's add eat lunch. Cool. And you can see, let's go back. Maybe we should add a margin left to prioritize. Button. Let's add a margin left of 4. It's not working. Oh, because they're both cripes. There we go. Now it'll work. If you can't tell, I'm hungry. I want to eat lunch. It's on my to-do list. Okay. So again, this doesn't work yet. And just, this is margin right 4. This is margin left 4. What those 4s mean depends on, I think it's based on the base font size, I think. They're not 4 pixels, it's 4, maybe, I can't really remember. Maybe it's 4 basically spaces. Okay. So now we have to add, since it's a button, let's add an event handler to it. And so we put that here on click. And this is where we want to call dispatch. So we have dispatch here. This is what we can use to dispatch our new action. The action is to prioritize. We have an action handler already on the reducer. So once I add this, this thing should work. So let's run this. And the function we want to call is dispatch. So the dispatch, let me save, okay. Dispatch takes an action. And our action is an object with 2 properties. Dispatch, the first property is the type. This is the type prioritize. prioritize. And that's not spelled right. And the thing we want to actually flag as being prioritized is the index itself. Cool. So now, if I come in here and let's see, that brain's tired because he needs to eat. Click this. Okay, well, we haven't seen anything. Let's actually use Daniel's cool to come in here and take a look at our components. I have, look at all the components. There's the to-do list, there's the provider, and look at wraps. This context.provider, this is awesome. Here's the form, and it has access to the to-do context. Let's go to here. You'll notice that it has a hook to the to-do context. We can take a look at what's in here. So the priority was flagged as true, but we have no way of displaying it. So we need to show which index is being, we need to show that it's actually been prioritized. So we can come back into our to-do list code. Oh boy, that's crazy. Let's go back into to-do list code. After the remove button, let's have some interesting stuff. So this is my index. My for each thing that's been added to this list, let's put its priority, its index, and then what will this do? Oh, I see. Here we have the item name up here. Let's wrap it. So this would be better. Now I see what we're doing. This will give its index, and we're going to bring it down here. But we need to show whether it's prioritized. The way we show it's been prioritized is if it's been marked bold or if it's been styled bold. So we're going to put this in a span. And in that span, we can check to see, we'll give it a class that is based on whether it's prioritized. So we can go class name, it's this. So we'll do a ternary operator on priority. It's priority, item.priority is a Boolean. Item.priority. So if item priority, let's add font weight bold class. This is a Bootstrap utility class. Font weight bold. But if it's not priority, then we just want to, oops, that's a bit close there. If it's not priority, we'll just not give it a class name. Save this. Cool. Now let's take a look at what we got. Lunch. Cool. Its index is 0. Oof. I can prioritize and deprioritize it. Add another one. Driving lesson. This is what I'm up to this week, or today. Cool. Uh-oh. Cannot read property ID of undefined. We got so far. We got so far. Of undefined. Oh, item ID. I see. How that happened. So we got an item, but we didn't. Well, I prioritized it. Well, let's try this again. This is how I got to do this. I got to go through each one and see how this looks. So it didn't happen when I had one item, but it happened when I had two. So am I missing something? What am I missing? Eat lunch. Add a to-do list. See, this works. Toggle. when I have one. Run away. That breaks. So something's not working right in my priority handler, my guess is. Because I'm giving it the, when I dispatch, I'm giving it prioritize index. That should work. I come into my global state. Come into global state. Let's take a look at global state. Got my ad provider. This is correct. ID, this is cool. Remove, totally fine. State, this filter is good. Prioritize, this is the one I added. Item index, index is action item. And then not priority. This should work. Now I'm curious. What I'd like to do is wonder. What I'd like to do is actually step through this, if you guys don't mind, because something doesn't make sense to me. And I hit prioritize, and this is where looking at DevTools can really help. So the to-do list, this thing does have a priority of true. And when I go to prioritize again, it has a priority of false. This is ID 0, right? So let's add a new one, which is run away. And if I look at run away, oh, look at its ID. That doesn't look right. I would have expected something different. That needs to be an integer of some sort. So the ID creation for these is not right. Yeah, what I would do, I would have expected, and that's probably here. So so this strategy, what I have here, state.length times math random. I'm going to multiply this times 1,000, and I'm going to math for it. This limits the number of IDs I can have, but at least it'll give us an integer of some sort. Okay. Yeah, eat lunch. And if I look at this, it will work. If I look in here in the Chrome DevTools, in the components, I got a unique identifier. But now if I do, what am I doing here? This is, I'm going to just run away. That's how I feel. And I'm going to take a look at, cool, I have a unique ID. So now if I hit prioritize it, oh, it didn't work again. That's weird. Item.id cannot read property ID of undefined. So now, that is bizarre. Cannot read property ID in to-do list component. Cannot read property ID of undefined. All right, now I'm confused. Something's not right, and I'm very tired. But now I'm going to trick this so I can see, nope, not you. Let's go in here to my sources. We are going to go into here, and if I step, I should be able to, once I try to add a new one, just run away, prioritize. Oh, no, this isn't going to let me do this. Probably because it's here. Static. Oh. Maybe it never gets there. Okay. Well, I did pause the recording for a little bit because I realized what the error was. I was going down the debug hole. That didn't help. The issue is, remember how I said this map function, I need to do an explicit return? I'm returning, oh, I see. I'm only returning if I don't find it, but if I do find it, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm only returning when I do find it. I also have to return if I don't find it, and in this mapping, you know. So that's the thing I was missing. And there's some debugging there. Oops, let's go ahead and keep that going. All right, this will not work. And I don't need that anymore. Cool. I just added, I can prioritize, deprioritize, run away, and hide. Just a minute. Almost done. Okay. And I'm able to prioritize and deprioritize. There we go. It's all beautiful. It's really intense. There's a lot going on in there. Hopefully you're able to step through this on your own. Yeah. And do enjoy. This is actually kind of cool stuff. All right. I am done for the day.